Since the late 90s, the month of June in the United States has been designated as LGBT Pride Month, a month meant to celebrate the gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender community and the achievements of its members. The month of June holds particular importance for the LGBT community because of what is known as the Stonewall Riots, which was a series of demonstrations in response to a violent police raid on the Stonewall Inn, which was a hotel and a bar in Greenwich Village, Manhattan, in late June of 1969. And since then, June has been widely viewed as a time for LGBT activism and a push for LGBT rights here in the United States. Okay, why do I bring this up today? Well, to put it bluntly, I do not like confusion. I do not like ambiguity. In God, there is no darkness. Where light and clarity exist, so too is God's presence. So let's spend the next 10 minutes or so shedding some light and clarity upon a subject that nobody seems to want to ever address or talk about, although it's virtually, I think, impossible to ignore, especially now, in these days, during this month, which is the church's stance on homosexuality, especially in regards to LGBT Pride Month. Before we dive into this, I want to express the reality of the matter. In the church this morning, in this church here in our pews, there is probably not a single person who would declare him or herself to be agnostic on this subject. In our pews, there are strong opinions, I'm sure, that span a vast spectrum. I'm very much aware of that. There are men and women and young people here who might identify as having same-sex attraction. There are men and women and young people here who have loved ones, people they love dearly, who identify as having same-sex attraction. Anything that I say here this morning is not meant in any way to upset or to offend or to marginalize. I only want to express the church's teachings in hopefully a delicate, on this delicate matter as presented by the Catechism, and to offer some pastoral advice as to how we can really allow the light of Christ to shine upon this oftentimes dim and confusing topic. Even if you disagree with something or everything, perhaps, that I say this morning, I encourage you not to tune out this message, but to at least consider it. In the second letter to the Corinthians that we hear this morning, St. Paul reminds us to be courageous, whether in the day-to-day task of doing ministry here on this earth, or in the reality of facing death and eternity. We're called to courage in all things. And when handling such a challenging subject as this, we need to remember this exhortation. Remember the call to courage that is your baptismal call. Don't let the fear of social stigma or peer pressure or perhaps negative perception of others keep you from exercising this duty to courage. When it comes to a discussion of homosexuality in the Catholic faith, I think each of us is called to courage in a very real and particular way. Perhaps the first thing to do here is to start really at the ground level and dispel a really horrible misunderstanding, which is this incorrect belief that the Catholic Church hates people who identify as gay, or people who express their sexuality or their gender differently than might be viewed as traditional. This is not true at all. The church is not somehow shocked or befuddled by the presence of individuals who experience same-sex attraction within the body of Christ. Nor does the church in any way advocate for the weeding out or the transition or conversion of these people through therapy or similar means. If anyone has ever told you this before, they're lying. If you've ever believed this, you've been misinformed. Here is what the church teaches word for word from the Catechism so there can be no confusion. The number of men and women who have deep-seated homosexual tendencies, the church reminds us, is not negligible. It's not negligible. They do not choose their homosexual condition. For most of them, it is a trial. They must be accepted with respect, compassion, sensitivity. Every sign of unjust discrimination in their regard should be avoided. And I would add even more strongly that every sign of discrimination in their regard should be unequivocally condemned. The Catechism goes on to say that these persons are called to fulfill God's will in their lives, and if they're Christians, to unite to the sacrifice of the Lord's cross the difficulties that they may encounter from their condition. In short, people who struggle with same-sex attraction are dear sons and daughters of God. They're worthy of the highest dignity afforded to them. We are called to love them exactly as they are, as we are called to love ourselves exactly as we are. We are all called to virtue and constant conversion towards virtue, but we are at the same time, and I think we all know this, works in progress. We should be encouraged to exercise patience over the messiness of our lives and the messiness of the lives of others. Okay, with all that said, is it safe then to infer that we can celebrate our brothers and sisters with same-sex attraction? Absolutely. Every single one of us is worthy of being lifted up and loved by our brothers and sisters. So that means that the church should be all in on Pride Month, right? All in on rainbow flags and parades? No. And let me say this now so there can be no misunderstanding. The Catholic Church should not encourage its members to participate in celebrations of LGBT Pride Month, because the purpose of Pride Month does not align with the teachings of the Church. Perhaps up until now you've heard mixed messaging on this, and I would not be surprised, I would not blame you. In the past few weeks, I've witnessed really a complete vortex of confusion regarding the celebration of Pride Month within the church. At the beginning of the month, there were reports of priests and bishops in Germany who were blessing same-sex unions. I've seen church bulletins, even here in the United States, adorned with rainbow flags and invitations to support the Catholic LGBT community. I've even seen articles in America Magazine, which is the Jesuit publication, many of you might be familiar with it, that was highlighting how LGBT Catholics are celebrating Pride Month, insinuating that this celebration is a positive thing. But then on the flip side, there have been Catholic bishops such as Bishop Thomas Tobin of Providence, Rhode Island, and Bishop Joseph Strickland of Tyler, Texas, who have come out explicitly in condemnation of such celebrations. The bishops are correct in their condemnation, and here's why. In another world, in another time, I could see an occasion where it would absolutely be morally permissible for a Catholic to march in, say, for instance, an LGBT parade. If people with same-sex attraction were being put in concentration camps, as we all know was a very true reality in Nazi Germany, or if they were being denied basic human rights here in our own country right now, I would go as far as to say that it would be our duty, it would be the duty of a Catholic to support the human rights of our marginalized brothers and sisters. But to think that Pride Month and Pride celebrations in our current day and age are organized for such purposes is dreadfully naive. Pride Month, as it is celebrated today, is not about rights. There is not a single inalienable right under the Constitution that is currently not afforded to the LGBT community in equal measure with the rest of the population. Pride Month in its current form is about the acceptance and celebration of sexual acts and relationships that the Church teaches to be intrinsically disordered. Now let's parse out that terminology because I know it sounds harsh. Nobody ever wants to hear that they're disordered, right? Especially someone who might already feel rejected by maybe their family or even their church. But to say that there is a disordered nature to homosexuality is not an indictment at all of a person, but of a condition insofar as it is acted upon in a sexual manner. Homosexual acts, according to the Catechism, are contrary to the natural law. Furthermore, they close the sexual act to the gift of life, which is its intended end. Also, they do not proceed from a genuine and affective complementarity, sexual complementarity, which can only be realized through the marriage of a man and woman. Under no circumstances, says the Church, can homosexual acts be approved. Under no circumstances. And lest anyone ever think that only homosexual acts are considered disordered, it is important to remember that the use of our bodies or the bodies of another person for any reason other than to achieve its proper end is considered disordered. A homosexual relationship is disordered sexuality in the same sense that using birth control is a disordered sexuality, or in the same sense that sex before marriage is a disordered sexuality. Now, I'm sure that many of you might be saying, Father Zach, look, I don't fly a rainbow flag or go to a pride event because I condone disordered sexual acts. I do it because I'm proud of who I am, or I'm very proud of my son or daughter or brother or sister or aunt or uncle who has same-sex attraction. And I understand that, truly, I understand that. But I would counter in this way. Would you fly let's say a hammer and sickle flag above your house in memory of those persecuted or killed by a communist regime? I sure hope not. I sure hope you wouldn't do that. And not because solidarity with such people would be wrong, but because you would know that flying that kind of flag would be a scandal. Because you know that that flag means communism. You can fly it for a different reason in your mind. You've decided upon a different reason, but that doesn't change the fact of the reality of what it represents. And that, in fact, is a scandal. People see something and they interpret it in a particular way. And if you can reasonably predict how people will react to something and you don't have the opportunity to nuance your position, then you are at fault for leading people astray. The fact that I'm hanging around a street corner at 2 a.m. to evangelize prostitutes isn't going to help me when the police come to pick me up. The fact that I'm marching in the Women's March because I support Title IX in NCAA athletics is not going to stop someone from thinking that I'm in support of Planned Parenthood. As Catholics, we need to be very smart about the witness of our actions because we represent something larger than ourselves. We represent the Church. And to cause confusion among the faithful is an enormous problem, and we should take great care in avoiding the muddying of waters. You know what? In today's world, taking a stand in favor of the Church's teachings on sexuality just might earn you a whole bunch of very familiar reproofs. Bigot, homophobe. Bishop Tobin was referred to as such by the Boston Globe, who called his tweets, the ones which encourage Catholics to not attend pride events, homophobic. And you've got to think, really, homophobic. Does someone at the Globe truly believe that Bishop Tobin is afraid of people with same-sex attraction? Does someone at the Globe truly believe that Bishop Tobin hates LGBT people? Such accusations are utter nonsense. We need to treat them as such. If you truly do not believe that you can love unconditionally a person while simultaneously disapproving with some action of theirs, you have an incorrect idea of what love is. If anyone ever challenges you in this way, give it right back to them. Not a single one of us is without a friend or a loved one who makes decisions that we may not agree with, that we may think are harmful. Perhaps you've even told them that. But this doesn't mean that we don't love them any less. I want to conclude today with a challenge to all of us. Do not think for a moment that just because Catholics should not participate in LGBT Pride Month, we somehow have no responsibility to lift up Catholics who identify as being part of the LGBT community. We absolutely do. And I would suggest doing this in two ways. First of all, we can encourage our Catholic friends and loved ones with same-sex attraction to pursue a life of chastity. The Catechism tells us that by the virtues of self-mastery that teach them their inner freedom, at times by the support of friendship, by prayer and sacramental grace, they can and should gradually and resolutely approach Christian perfection. It's so encouraging. I spoke at the beginning of my homily about courage. what St. Paul calls us to, the importance of being courageous. And appropriately, there's a very popular ministry within our own Catholic Church called Courage. That's the name of the ministry, which adopts the mission of counseling men and women with same-sex attraction to live chaste lives in fellowship, in truth, and love. The second way we should be supporting those with same-sex attraction is by encouraging them to have pride. Not LGBT pride specifically, but pride in the cross of Jesus Christ. St. Paul says, I do not boast in anything but the cross of our Lord Jesus Christ. As unique children of God, redeemed by the blood of Christ, we have reason to boast. We have reason to celebrate the people that we are, fearfully and wonderfully made in the image and likeness of God. No one is a mistake. No one should feel ashamed, but we're called to be courageous. In the face of a culture that wants to create its own harmful morality, we're called to be courageous because we know that all that God has created is good, designed to love and to be loved in right order.